Best broadhead choices for elk coming right up. So with our influx of new hunters, which the industry is really happy to see, and also the difficulties with travel, especially outside of the U.S. into Canada and other countries, there's been a huge resurgence for hunting altogether. But a lot of those hunters that were used to traveling are now booking elk hunts. And so elk hunts seem to have really increased in popularity. And so therefore the questions about what is the best broadhead for my elk hunting trip seem to be a reoccurring factor on our phone calls and questions online. So today we're going to cover some things that are important to consider when you pick a broadhead for your elk hunt. And the first thing you need to think about is, what is my platform? Am I shooting a recurve, a compound, or a crossbow? Now, we support all those platforms, and as hunters, we should always support all those platforms in any legal method of hunting, because in this day and age, we really have got to stick together. But to stay focused on the subject, when we're talking about elk and those platforms, you kind of need to consider different things across the board. If we're talking about a crossbow platform, I am fixed all the way. I don't have to think about it, don't have to consider anything else. I don't even have to wonder if I'm going to do this or that. I'm going to go with a fixed blade that is tough, that has excellent penetration statistics, that has thick blades, something that's very durable, but mostly something that's going to be accurate potentially at long distances, and it is going to pass through. On the Afflictor line, we have the K2 fixed and the fixed EXT, which I'll talk about both of those here in just a little bit. When we're talking about compounds, of course you have a wide array, and you get into fixed blades, hybrid blades, and mechanicals, and you really have a good choice across the board of all of those. As long as you have a proper setup, you're good to go, and you're looking at personal preference. And when we're looking at the more traditional setups, those guys more traditionally like a traditional broadhead, right? Single bevel potential, other fixed blade options. But some of those trad guys are actually shooting different hybrid broadheads, like our Hybrid X or our K2 Mini in the heavyweight stainless steel versions, where they're getting into 175 grains. So that is also an option there. The other consideration on your setup is, how are you set up as far as your arrow weight? Are you set up? Do you know what your FOC is, your KE, your momentum? Are you confident in your setup for an animal that is such a big animal like an elk? Now, I say this because some of you guys that are already elk hunters, you understand this. This is second nature. But when we're talking about, since the industry is kind of developing and changing, and there's a lot more elk hunters, and we're locked out of everywhere else to go, you're going to see a lot more new elk hunters, and they will consider an elk just a big deer. And I know that that's sometimes maybe a little bit of a strange analogy to use, but it's true. I mean, I get the calls where, I'm a whitetail hunter and I'm going elk hunting, and I want to use my same setup. It's just not always that easy, right? So you have to consider, where are you going to be hunting? Are you going to be hunting a water hole with a stand or a blind placement? Are you going to be spot and stock? Are you going to be calling? Are you going to be having to take a shot that is pushing your limits? And that will all come down to what you're choosing as far as your arrow, its weight, making sure that you have enough momentum and energy that whatever broadhead you pick can do the job on an animal as large as an elk. So you have to consider those factors as well. After you have thought about that, you can start to think about, what broadhead is going to be best for me. So one consistent theme over the years, no matter what part of this industry I've been, it seems that elk hunters have a preference for a certain diameter cut, no matter what broadhead that they're shooting, and that is a 1.5 inch cut. I don't know why that is. That is what, when people call in that are, seasoned elk hunters, that seems to be what they really like to go with. Now, of course, there's highs and lows to that, but I'm just saying, as an average, in our experience, for the most people, what they're looking for is 1.5 inches. The discovery behind that is, that seems to be the cut that offers the greatest penetration for most people's setup. So So, when that broadhead hits, that 1.5 inches seems to really be able to pass through that elk. Now, why does that make a difference? Well, it makes a difference because as you start getting into broadhead cuts that are 2 inches, 2.5 inches, and up, you really have to have the right setup to drive that home. And you may also be handicapping yourself a little bit because of those larger blades. Sometimes are a little more fragile. They require a lot more energy to open and to penetrate and to pass through. So you really have to be considerate of your overall setup when you're considering using a larger cut blade. So again, back to that 1.5 inches, it seems to be the most popular for what guys are looking for that are seasoned elk hunters. Also, you'll run into the fixed versus mechanical debate all the time on elk. And, fixed are tough. They're definitely going to do the job. The right placement, you're going to not have any problem on an elk. But mechanicals are the same way. Mechanicals have come a long way. They're tough now. You can get them with thick blades, and you can get them that they don't require a lot of energy to open, and they're going to do the job for you. Again, you have to do a little bit of research and selection to make sure you're getting the right offering. On the Afflictor side, for our fixed blades, we offer the K2 Fixed and the Fixed EXT. Both of these have been extremely popular in Africa, in Alaska, for elk, for red stag, and for a lot of big game. The reason is you have blades that are almost 60 thousandths. They're super sharp, super tough, and they're really a great penetrating broadhead, and they're suitable for all platforms. And I think that that's one of the reasons that especially our Fixed EXT and our K2 Fixed have been so popular for elk hunting and big game hunting. When you look at the potentials for mechanicals and hybrid broadheads, we have a series of 1.5 inch cut hybrids in the K2 Mini and the Hybrid X Mini that are 1.5 inch, and those weights vary from 100 grains that are available all the way up to 175 grains. So you have a wide offering there in case you wanted to mess with your FOC or really play with your setup, building an elk arrow. And we also have the Hybrid EXT, which is our original 1.5 inch red-ferruled broadhead, and it has always been extremely popular for elk. We even have the K2 Hybrid, which is our original 1.75 inch cut, and a lot of guys with the right setup, they love that for elk. We've had awesome success, seen great penetration, even on bad shots where guys have spine shot an elk where that elk is dumped in its tracks, and we've gotten penetration through an elk vertebra. So, you want to make sure when you are considering your broadhead that you have something that is sharp, that is penetrating, and that is suitable for your setup. If you are taking a guide, get their recommendations. Ask them what they recommend for arrow weight and some states may even require that you have a certain broadhead like Idaho. If you're going to Idaho, you have to have a fixed, end of story. And so you are limited by your choices just on that. So as you consider an elk hunt and choice of broadhead, first consider your platform. What kind of weapon am I shooting? Consider your setup. How is my arrow set up? What kind of momentum and KE do I have? And then third, you can start to base your choices for your broadhead based on your personal preference, but mostly on durability, accuracy, and penetration.